If you then want to go and actually build something within the districts, you will need security on the ground. The security on the ground will, in more cases, be provided to you by a Taliban commander, a local one on the ground, who will get anywhere between 20 to 40% of the overall budget of your project for security. If you consider what the amounts of money are that we're currently pouring into southern Afghanistan, I really think they don't need the opium in order to fuel what they're doing currently. The Taliban, and we've heard that a lot, the Taliban are winning the propaganda war. They are absolutely, and it can't be overstated, they are the people who put out the narrative. They are the only people who are actually talking to the population. We are lacking behind light years in terms of how we are perceived and how they are perceived. And it is, after all, the major battleground. There has been a recent poll like a few months ago by ABC, BBC, which gives you numbers, something about that not a lot of people are actually supporting the Taliban. That is something which doesn't reflect our reality at all. Most polls, actually, which I've been seeing coming out of Afghanistan, reflect any reality on the ground at all. They're actually quite popular in southern Afghanistan. If you have a government which is corrupt to the core, a police force which extorts money from you and which is often involved in kidnapping rings, and you have the other alternative of the Taliban, who you might not agree with at all turns, but who aren't that arbitrary. The choice is relatively easy for a lot of people on the ground. It's we are as much losing as they are winning, always goes the saying in a way. And they're actually winning the hearts and minds, and they're very quick to adapt their strategies in comparison to what we are doing. We had the Taliban as using the stick a lot under Mullah Abdul, if people remember that. We heard a lot about how he went into villages and decapitated a lot of people he determined to be spies, and there were a lot of things happening around this. In the villages currently, like, the mode has changed. The Taliban have kind of stepped back a little bit about the policies which have been interfering immensely with, or haven't resonated with, the local cultures, and they're doing things which reconnect. There are a lot of stories around, like in the recent grape harvest in an area was extremely good, was so good that it didn't have enough people in order to harvest the grapes, and the local Taliban commander actually ordered a stop of the attack he planned, took all his fighters to the villages, and collected all the grapes on behalf of the villagers. That is something which obviously deeply resonates with the local community far more than us coming in and promising something that in the end doesn't really materialize. When it comes to Kandahar city, our focus and the foreign military's focus is on Kandahar city right now. We've been doing a lot of talking, a lot of talks in the last 6 weeks. We hear often the name Fallujah being dropped when talking about Kandahar city and what is to come. We really hope it doesn't come all out to that, but fact is they will focus on Kandahar city. It's part of what the foreign military is planning to do. It's what they think they want to protect. They're building a ring of stability, or what they're terming to be a ring of stability around Kandahar, sort of bases and a wider ring in an attempt to stop to retake the city, actually, is what they said, which probably is right in a way, since the Taliban are within the city, they're operating with impunity, they're moving about, not in a way that they're openly on the street, but they can do whatever they want, wherever they want, specifically when it comes to assassinations. One of the issues you have with focusing on the cities, and we're right now focusing on Lashkar, and we focus on Kandahar and the highway between this, is when we're talking about a population-centric counterinsurgency and we want to protect the population. All in, that would maybe allow us to protect about 40% of the population. It's an immensely rural place. People live in villages spread out over the districts, very hard to get to. We are by nowhere near have the military force currently and to do any real protection of the people. From what we've seen so far, and there already has been an immense troop increase. A lot of the Marines which have already been deployed over the last year came to Kandahar. A lot of them are currently operating in Marja. But they have been coming to Kandahar, and there has been a lot of things going on already. What we've seen very concretely is a pickup on night raids, where people are being renditioned or extracted from their houses at the middle of the night. One of our friends spent a month in... she spent 1 month in the detention center at the Kandahar airfield and was then handed over to the NDS, where he spent another month, and he finally ended up bribing his way out with $6,000, which in southern Afghanistan, if you aren't a construction worker and if you're not doing opium deals, is an immense amount of money. $6,000 really is a lot of money. He isn't the Taliban. He isn't supporting the insurgency. He's living in southern Afghanistan, and if you live in southern Afghanistan, likeliness is it that one member of your family, at least one member, is with the Taliban, was with the Taliban, or supports them. So accusations are very easily made in that field, and they're often still doing these rendition programs on faulty intelligence.
In general, Afghans' perceptions of foreigners, of the foreign military presence, and of whatever civilian efforts there are, it's based on a very limited experience. There are basically two ways which an ordinary Kandahari might experience foreigners. It's through money, or it's through conflict. Either you're working as a construction worker and you meet the people who are giving you money, or the Canadian engineers, let's say, who are putting out a project, or you'll experience the international presence, as we do mostly, which is a convoy barreling past with guys with goggles and masks and everything, pointing guns at you. That's about the level of interaction between internationals and Afghans in the south. As Felix said, increasing night raids are also driving a wedge in between Afghans and foreigners, since most of these raids are being conducted with very little improvement on the intelligence front. And by now, conspiracy theories dominate how people see foreigners and how people like to explain what's going on. You have this argument which runs that internationals in America has so much money, so many satellites, spies, all of the best technology. How is it possible that all of these resources can't defeat a few guys from the villages with some old Kalashnikovs? People can't make the connection. And then the follow-on from that is, of course, that they don't really want to defeat the Taliban. And then you can also go a bit further and say that actually they're supporting the Taliban because they want to be in southern Afghanistan for kind of geopolitical domination of the region. Actually, a very large proportion of people, even in the city, believe this. Even educated friends of ours who spent years living in Germany, and who understand a bit of the kind of international perspective, who 1 year ago would have said, we don't really believe this. Nowadays they say, I don't really know anymore. It's inconceivable that the foreigners could be so incompetent, that their line goes. The basic fact is Afghans don't know us. We're more or less aliens to them, and it's because we're not communicating who we are. Just finally and briefly, and we'll probably talk about it a lot more in the questions, this issue of negotiations. I think slowly we seem to be reaching the point, at least on the ground, and much more so in Europe than in America, that negotiation seems to be the way things are moving forward. We heard a lot about it at the time of the London conference, and maybe that's been displaced a bit